It was 6 o'clock in the morning, the kind of quiet suburban dawn where the only sound should be a coffee maker bubbling. But instead I heard gravel crunching in a voice that was way too official for that hour, telling me I was under arrest for trespassing. Yeah, trespassing on my own property. That's how my insane fight with the HOA president, let's call her Brenda Maxwell, kicked off, an encounter that didn't just clear my name, but ended up revealing a secret about my land. And her, that was bigger than our entire subdivision, bigger than anyone could have imagined. Comment right now if your HOA has ever weaponized a clipboard against you, because these stories need to be told. This whole mess started 3 weeks earlier when I moved back to Willow Creek Estates after inheriting my grandpa Silas's place. The old guy had built a solid hunting cabin about 50 feet from the main house back in '87, a simple structure with running water and proper permits, and I was using it as my workshop, my sanctuary, a place to escape the chaos, you know? But Brenda, our self-appointed queen of compliance, decided that sanctuary was her business. Brenda wasn't your typical busybody, measuring the grass and debating mailbox fonts. She was a general, running a meticulous surveillance state. She carried a camera with a telescopic lens, a clipboard thick enough to stop a drone, and she had this gaze that suggested every tiny detail of your life was a potential violation waiting to be cited. Neighbors warned me, but I figured how bad could one person be? The answer, friends, was catastrophically bad. It began small, as tyranny always does. First, it was the citation for my charcoal grill being visible from the street during non-use hours, a $100 fine. Then, a genuinely baffling notice about my front yard petunias being an unapproved shade of magenta, which apparently violated our community's subtle aesthetic palette rule. I'm not even kidding. Each fine was small, but the cumulative effect, the constant anxiety of waiting for the next ridiculous piece of paper, that was the weapon. I started looking closely at her citations. The printouts had this home office wobble. The seal looked fuzzy. The fonts were a hair off the county's official template. And the serial numbers? When I called the Redwood County Clerk's office, a patient woman named Anna told me, "Sir, none of these tracking numbers exist in our system." That's when my blood ran cold. Brenda wasn't just being overzealous. She was committing fraud, impersonating county authority, a serious felony. Before I could file a police report, she escalated. That Friday, after another batch of fake citations landed, I decided I needed peace. I grabbed my sleeping bag, my old laptop, and headed to the cabin for the night. A silent protest, a declaration of independence in my own backyard. I had no idea she was watching, waiting for me to walk right into her grand finale. At exactly 6 a.m., the headlights swept the cabin, followed by the sound of doors slamming. I saw Brenda next to a deputy, let's call him Officer Hayes, pointing at my cabin like it was a meth lab. I grabbed my phone, started recording, because you always need the receipts. Brenda launched into her prepared speech, loud enough for the neighbors. "Officer, this is a clear violation of Community Code 7.4.2, overnight occupancy in an accessory structure." She dramatically pointed to a bright red condemned notice she'd slapped on the door sometime while I was asleep. It was still warm from her printer, a pathetic, frantic touch. But Hayes, the deputy, wasn't buying her theatrics. He stepped closer to the notice, his expression shifting from polite obligation to professional skepticism. "Ma'am," he said carefully, his body cam blinking its official little red light, "this appears to be a private notice, not a public works order. And honestly, this looks like a legitimate, permitted structure to me." That's when I stepped out, phone recording. "Officer, I've been documenting everything. This notice was placed here between midnight and now. And if you check your records, County Code 7.4.2 doesn't exist in that format. This is part of a pattern of documented fraud." Brenda's face went white. The dynamic shifted instantly from her personal drama to an official police investigation. Officer Hayes sternly warned her about misusing county materials and left, but I knew the fight was just beginning. That night, the methodical curiosity took over. I logged into our HOA's online system, Creek Compliance Pro, and found the digital breadcrumbs. I had received 43 digital violations, but only 17 had shown up physically. She was generating them at a machine gun pace, but the timestamps, they were physically impossible. One violation was submitted Tuesday afternoon, but the automated receipt was generated Monday night, nearly 15 hours before the alleged violation. Time travel or timeline manipulation? Clearly the latter. But the real smoking gun was in the audio files. Every violation was supposed to trigger an automated text-to-speech phone call. I downloaded the file expecting a robotic voice, but what I heard was the warm, natural rhythm of a human voice reading from a carefully prepared script. "This is an automated message from Willow Creek HOA," the voice began, but the pauses, the inflections, the slight vocal uptick, it wasn't a machine, it was a performance. I pulled up her welcome video from the HOA website, extracted the audio, and ran a spectral analysis. Identical vocal signatures. Brenda was sitting in her home office, recording personalized hate mail, then uploading it to the portal to appear automated and official. The sheer audacity of the premeditation was staggering. The worst part? This wasn't just petty annoyance. Within days of these digital violations appearing, my homeowner's insurance premium went up, my mortgage lender sent an inquiry, and my credit score dipped. Brenda had figured out how to weaponize the interconnected nature of modern property ownership, turning her fake finds into real financial poisons. I started reaching out to neighbors. Mrs. Chen, 3 doors down, had been cited for her vintage bird bath. When I played her the audio, her jaw dropped. "That's the same woman who called me personally last week, Brooks. She said the system was malfunctioning and she was following up manually." She wasn't just gaslighting me. She was gaslighting the whole community. The final piece of the puzzle fell into my lap via a clerical error. My email address is 1 letter off from the vendor's IT contact, and Brenda fat-fingered the address. I received an email chain with the subject line, "Compliance Strategy, Board Eyes Only." It contained a spreadsheet profiling residents based on compliance vulnerability factors, financial stress, family situation personality assessment. My entry read, "Recently inherited property, limited local support, shows technical competence that could be problematic if directed toward compliance investigation." She had been profiling me like a military strategist planning an assault. The attachments showed more. Coordination with a legal firm on HOA empowerment litigation and detailed instructions to an IT contact. "David, kill the utility layer before the next review. Turn off the easement overlay so residents don't fixate on boundaries we haven't established precedent over." Boom. That was the clue, right there in her own words. Utility layer. Her final desperate move was calling an emergency community meeting to pass an emergency resolution that would give her expanded enforcement powers. Scheduled an hour before my lawsuit response deadline. Of course. I walked into the parking lot meeting. She staged it outside like a roadside checkpoint, generators hissing, temporary PA crackling, and I knew she was expecting me to crumble. She started clicking through her presentation. Aerial photos of risk properties, and then one frame froze in my head. My cabin, circled in red like a bullseye, but bisecting the circle was a clear, unmistakable power line. Her own evidence slide had stamped a jurisdictional boundary across her target. When she finished, I approached the mic, holding my folder full of evidence, the fraudulent citations, the metadata analysis, and the utility map. "Madam President," I began, my voice clear and steady, "I have several concerns, starting with the fact that the letterhead on your document says Redwood County, but we live in Willow Creek Township. You are operating with the wrong government stationery." Her face flushed. But before she could dismiss me, I pressed on. "And more importantly, I have evidence proving that my cabin and a significant portion of the land you've been targeting sits entirely within a utility easement established in 1987. These documents show the power company has primary jurisdiction here, which means your violation notices have absolutely no legal standing." She didn't miss a beat. She reached over to the sound control panel and cut my microphone. The silence was the loudest sound in the world. You could hear zippers, the dry click of someone's tongue. Then, from the back, old Mr. Alvarez, the retired contractor, cut through the tension without shouting. "You don't get to mute evidence, Brenda. If you've got the law, you don't need the volume. Neighbors, realizing they'd been silenced and financially abused by a fraudster who literally cut the cord on democracy, erupted. Mrs. Chen stood up. I want to know about my bird bath and the surveillance photos of my children. In the chaos, I spoke loud enough for the room to hear the final blow. These documents are from the wrong government. Wrong seal, wrong jurisdiction. As Brenda fled the chaos, frantically whispering into her phone, I knew I had won the battle. But the war wasn't over until the county made it official. The next day, I got a call from Anna, the county clerk. Mr. Roberts, we're moving the hearing to live stream. The public has a right to see this. And Mr. Roberts, we found something else. Our investigation found that Brenda has been impersonating county authority for over 2 years. The main conference room was packed, streamed live. Anna laid out the case, the font fraud, the voice fraud, the email evidence of coordinating to kill the utility layer, and finally, the utility easement map. She pointed a laser at the blue-shaded corridor running right through my cabin. HOA regulations simply don't apply within these boundaries, she stated firmly. Brenda's lawyer, pale and defeated, could offer no defense. But the final, most satisfying moment was when the county clerk delivered the ruling. All violations within the easement corridor were voided, and the record was referred to the district attorney for felony fraud. That's when Brenda finally broke. She stood up trembling, eyes wild. I am the HOA, she shrieked, her voice cracking with pure, unadulterated megalomania. I have been protecting property values. These people needed someone to enforce the rules, and I did what was necessary. The outburst was captured live, the defining desperate image of her complete downfall. 3 days later, she showed up at my door. The county had ordered immediate restitution. Her hand shook so violently she could barely hold the pen as she signed my refund check. The elaborate fiction she'd built had collapsed into a barely legible scrawl. The real victory wasn't the money, though. It was the institutional change. A new HOA oversight commission was formed. The layers she hid were restored on the public map. And that night, I sat in my cabin, listening to the gentle clink-clink of Mrs. Chen's wind chimes, finally free to ring again. The bronze marker, the one I'd kicked in the mud, is now sitting on my workbench beside my grandpa's old toolbox. It's a small, stubborn proof that what you build can outlast what tries to undo it. Utility Easement 1987. It saved my cabin, and it saved our community from a tiny tyrant hiding behind a fake clipboard. If you've made it this far, hit that like button. And tell me this, when does an HOA's authority cross the line from maintaining standards to criminal tyranny? Was Brenda a true criminal, or just a desperate woman protecting her neighborhood the only way she knew how? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. See you in the next video.